So Glenn, I've got these really cool emmer wheat berries, right? There's a blue tinged emmer that you sent me that are beautiful. And of course,
Yeah,
an ancient strain. We got to learn all about that. Here's the flour that it turned into. And this is my loaf that I baked from it, which we're going to cut
nice.
open in a couple of minutes and see if it turned out. It feels a little heavy. I haven't been able to get the oven spring lately that I love. So, and I think it's more my oven and my technique than it is anything else. But let me introduce you to everybody. We're on Pizza Talk with. I'm Peter Reiner, but this is Glenn Roberts, who some of you know, some of you probably don't know, but should, because you've probably been eating and influenced by the seeds and grains that he's been growing. And if you are eating at any fine restaurants in America, you probably had Anson Mills products because Glenn is the founder of Anson Mills. So Glenn, thank you for joining us today. And where are you
Pleasure.
coming to us from? Where are you broadcasting from?
I'm in Kay Rensler, our creative director, and European trained pastry and other kind of chef in her kitchen on Martha's Vineyard in Chilmark today.
Nice, Martha's Vineyard, sweet. So, listen, those of us who have been tracking your career and know about you, are in awe. But for those who don't, can you give us kind of a synopsis of your journey? I mean, you refer to yourself as a tractor donkey, and I want to know what that means. I've heard you say that. You spoke at our bread symposium a couple of years ago, and that was of course everyone goes, "Oh yeah, the tractor donkey guy," but you're a whole lot more than that. So tell us about the Anson Mills story and your story, and and how essentially you've impacted the culinary world.
Well, I was lucky enough to have a long career in hospitality and building hotels and restaurants and working with the best chefs in America for almost 2 decades without a break, and came to the conclusion as I was finishing up a property, which was an old Georgian in Savannah, Georgia, that maybe working 110 hours a week wasn't the best idea to continue through the end of my life. And I particularly was struck with the Savannah culture of rice. And I had no idea that the entire 400 and some mile corridor between North Carolina and Florida was called rice. It was all rice, all along the coast and on the Sea Islands especially. And it struck me one day that maybe we should be doing rice. I have no idea why. And next thing I know, through help of many, many smart people, which is why I'm called a tractor donkey, I'm farming rice with Dick Schultz and his son Richard across the river from Savannah and Okatee. And Marion Chalmers, one of my best buddies in the whole world, is the grower there still. And we are still growing rice with Marion Chalmers, which is amazing.
Is this the same rice that was grown hundreds of years ago to kind of like created the wealth of the nations in a sense?
Yes, and the odd thing was that the seed was available for research, but was barely available in the U.S. And Dr. Anna McClung made that change, again, a smart person when I was riding around on a tractor, who made the seed available to everyone in the United States, along with Dr. Merle Shepard and a few others, Bolton, et cetera, the legacy names. This is the rice that defined the Americas. So I got into that, and I realized that before the Civil War, people grew everything with the rice. They just didn't grow rice. In the winter, they grew barley, wheat, whatever. I said, wheat? Ooh. Biscuit flour. So we first went into biscuit flour, then started realizing, and here's where the heresy is going to come in, that we have a hit from a Scottish nobleman in 1732 that Fife, F-I-F-E, wheat was being grown in the highlands of North Carolina, 1732. And it's not the national wheat of Canada until 1840s. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's where red Fife came in, because it was used as a Highlands rice bread flour as a winter rotation because it's facultative. It grows in the spring and in the winter.
Yeah.
So
So
you can plant it either time.
so red
That's
fife
how I
is
got
one
into
of the
bread culture.
it's one of the main strains, we'd say, of wheat that became part of the American wheat industry.
There's one thing that people have said from the time of Borealis bread 25, 30 years ago. I think Jim was the first person to grow red fife at scale. And he was doing it because it just has stunning flavors in bread work.
Mm.
And it still does. So the fact that it was part of Carolina heritage, which we always thought it was just Canadian, was really revelatory to me. And that started all of our stuff with polyculture, actually, that one citation.
So you started with rice, and this is the rice that we now call what, Carolina Gold. Is that the Carolina Gold rice, which essentially was not available for the consumer, but now is not only available at restaurants, but now people can actually buy it and prepare it at home, right? So you brought that whole crop back.
And it's really, and it's a few other people too, but Dr. Merle Shepard actually gets all the credit, top to bottom, period.
So how does rice like that, which I don't know if this falls in the category of what they call land race grain or
It
rice.
does.
Okay, so we have to define that for everybody. But how does this rice differ from the everyday rice that you buy, and that you get at a Chinese restaurant, or that or brown rice that people are cooking?
Sure.
What's different about this rice?
Carolina Gold rice has a chameleon starch quality was not preserved into modern rices. Rices are short grain, medium grain, long grain, and you'll see all in Asia. And the continental Americas seem to have fallen in love with long grain for some reason. And Carolina Gold was the first rice that went international from the Americas that was just barely over the long grain line. So it cooks like a medium grain, but it has the grain for grain properties of long grain. It's fluffy and individual grain, but its starch is such that you can make sticky rice with it. You can make risotto with it. It makes phenomenal risotto. It's what we call it chameleon starch properties. So it applies to all grain categories. But honestly, it's really a medium grain. When you say that in America, it's heritage. It wouldn't be accepted at a long grain mill in modern times, because it's the first long grain of the Americas. Interesting.
What about the flavor profile? That is interesting, but what makes does it taste different? To someone who knows rices, if they taste it, will they note a different flavor property than they would from a standard rice?
And just to make sure we say this and define it, in heirloom, AKA the same thing as landrace rices, that flavor equals nutrition. So if you think about thousands of years of hand selection, people actually selecting things for flavor, they're actually looking for nutrition as well. And we sort of moved away from that after the Industrial Revolution. So landrace is the proper term for old seeds. And in rice culture, that expression of flavor, where Carolina Gold is supposed to be a non-aromatic rice, meaning it doesn't pervade the room with popcorn aromas like aromatic rices do.
Yes,
but it
jasmine.
has, as new crop rice, which we stopped at the Industrial Revolution too, which is aerobic, breathing oxygen. The seed is live, so it's viable. You can plant it and it'll grow. You can malt it, right? And it goes right to bread work, because rice bread was our #1 bread. So with Carolina Gold, during the colonial era, you have expression of flavor as new crop aerobic rice that once it goes dormant, it really becomes nutty, nice, kind of really nuanced floral. But as new crop, it's robustly floral, and it has a minerality that's extremely attractive, and it has a calming thing that goes with it too, that I've actually seen rice right out of the field calm down a table. You can watch it happen, right?
Yeah. Well, and of course, this is, people are talking about this kind of stuff now, but when you first were bringing all of this out, it was a new idea. It was like a paradigm shift, or maybe a throwback to to an earlier era. But how did you begin to influence people and get people to even try it, or to grow it, and sort of see it as a viable way to make a living?
I wanted to see it return to hand scale on the Sea Islands. And in order to do that, I couldn't sell the seed. I had to give it away. There was a lot of Jim Crow resistance. We're in those times right now, and it's perfectly appropriate.
Yeah.
This rice was wiped out during Jim Crow. All the hand scale rices in the South essentially went away with the Great Migration and Jim Crow, which is horrible, but it's what happened. And I wasn't thinking on those paradigms, by the way. I'm the pasty-faced white guy in the room, but I was, because my friends were all people who grew up on the Sea Islands. My mother grew up on the Sea Islands of Carolina, right? And the people, while I was a shrimper, one of the tractor donkey things I did, I went to everything you can think of on the Carolina and Georgia Sea Islands. It was amazing to just get off the boat, even swim ashore sometimes when we were just hiding from weather, and go see local people and how generous and informed and smart they were about real important things. Like, we get beans from somebody who traded us for some shrimp, and the beans were incredible. And that leads to purple cake beans, and it leads to the unguiculata sea island peas, and that whole culture that goes with rice.
Right.
All these things were knitted together in a crop system that was hand scale for survival, that started under duress and slavery. And as I kept looking at that more and more, I'm going, why did we walk away from this? Why? Because the rices taste so good. The peas taste wonderful, rice and peas together. Jimmy Carter, right? Yep. We started the day with a brand new dish, rice and peas. We came home dead in the afternoon and had another brand new dish. Oh yeah, peas and rice, right? It's part of Georgia culture. It's part of Carolina culture. Those things go together. They actually grow together when you have the right cultivars.
So going from sort of this aha flavor experience to turning it and connecting the dots into making it something that could grow and influence others. How did you make that happen? How did you so you gave it away at first, obviously, and who did you give it to, and what happened after that?
Well, just to make sure I've made the point, Thunderbolt in Savannah is where all the shrimp trawlers used to hang. And Shem Creek in Charleston is where the shrimp trawlers that have been around forever hang. I still farm with one of my favorite people in the whole world, George Albers, who had shrimp boats on Shem Creek when I was striking on the Miss Alva for the Magwood family. Those were the farmer shrimpers. Those were, and black, white, green, yellow, didn't make any difference what color you were. Everybody wanted your stuff because it came right out of the water. Having said that, who did we first attract? And it was, honestly, you're not going to believe this, we had to go all the way to the West Coast. Alice Waters and Tom Keller. Why? Because I'd worked with both of them. They're both my heroes. And this is like 22 years ago. And my business partner, Catherine Schaffer, then and now, we've been in and out of businesses now, I think 37 years. Catherine knew Thomas because she'd actually gone to visit him in person. I hadn't done that. I didn't do that until well into he came to visit us. We didn't go see him. With Alice, you know what, honestly,
something like that happens.
I've never actually been in the same room with Alice, but Alice and my partner, Catherine, are very close, right? And the thing evolved from them. So it started in Oakland and Hellsburg, with French Laundry and Chez Panisse.
Right.
And we could not get people to understand what we were doing except locally. Like, we had lines of people that were interested on the Sea Islands. They wanted seed immediately. We want to grow it ourselves. We don't want you to do stuff for us. We want to do it ourselves. I said, you want to pound your own rice? Seriously? I said, yes, we do. I met a guy named Johnny Running Deer who actually knew how to flip a mortar, which is a stump with a hole in it. You turn it upside down, you have the flat side, and you got the pounding. He actually showed me and taught me how to pound rice and crack it exact every kernel in half.
Wow.
I mean, who can do that? That cuts the cook time in half and the fuel in half. Johnny Running Deer, his family and heritage has been there since the 1600s in the same spot in Okatee. on Delta Plantation. It's Delta Plantation now. His family was there before it was Delta Plantation. You know,
So are they
just amazing stuff.
Are they growing as a result of now this increased demand for these heirloom landrace products? Are they growing more? Are they able to essentially benefit from the renewed
Yes.
interest?
We just send seed now. We pay for everything, and they grow it. They distribute it now. We don't do it anymore. So it's moving. It's been very, very difficult. It's not easy to grow. I mean, we used to celebrate 30% harvest when I started. For the first 8 years or so, 30% was good. And who can afford to farm like that? I don't know. Now we're up 50, 60, but in the last 5 years with global climate change, there's threat. And the threat would be, what do we do over the horizon? Now we have resilient rices that grow without any water at all. They'll grow like wheat will grow with a dry harvest. That's all within the last 10 years, really. They started working on this in the 80s, believe it or not. The reason why I'm called Tractor Donkey, by the way, is because like people like you, Peter, I work with scientists with postdoc PhD stuff, and they just barely tolerate me, right? It's like, shut up, Glenn. Just do this. Thank you. Talk to you later. Right?
You get a lot of smart people around you.
That's the thing I learned. It's smart. You can't do this without scientists. I thought, hey, it's been around forever. We'll just do it again. Because there's so much involved. And if you're coming in like I did, growing up with my mom with all the stories, and rice, so she scream and throw it in the trash can and go, I hate this box rice, after she just poured a cup out to make rice for the day. By the way, I was the pet cook. I can't cook. So I got to cook for the pets. My mom never let me cook rice for her. And she's Geechee, rice with every meal, and the pets had rice with every meal.
And it's pretty serious. The Geechee culture and rice are like this,
totally.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And what you do is just get out of the way and let it evolve on its own. And it's breathtaking how fast it's moving in the last 5 years or so. It's really good.
What I'd like to do, Glenn, is well, let's wrap up this episode now, and we'll come back for a whole new segment. So we can talk. I want to talk more about how you went from rice now into wheat and also corn. You're really well known for corn and other things that you're growing. How Anson Mills kind of started milling all of this and finding, again, outlets for it. But I think the brilliant marketing plan is you start from the most influential chefs in America, Alice Waters, Thomas Keller, and Dan Barber, and people like that, who once they use it, then everybody wants to use it because, those are the influencers. So I don't know if that was how intentional that was, or if it just fell into place, but it doesn't work any better than that. And then we'll hear the rest of the story when we come back on the next episode of Pizza Talk. We're with Glenn Roberts, founder of Anson Mills, along with your partner, Catherine Schaffer, and we'll hear the rest of the story in the next episode. So this is like the loaf that I showed you earlier, cut in half, and this is a slice that I've taken off of that loaf, and I'm going to taste it now. So this is a sourdough boule made with about 35% of your blue emmer flour, and again, emmer being one of the most ancient of all wheat strains, that among the many seeds that you brought back, into popularity and into availability, and then the rest is my starter and bread flour, and it's got a fabulous aroma, and so I'm curious to see how it tastes. So of course it's got a little sour tang from having the long overnight fermentation, but also there's kind of a rich malty flavor. It's not this flour hasn't been malted per se, but it has a nice, I guess it's maltose flavor, whatever, and complexity, a lot of complexity. I'm just tasting, seeing if I can, like they do with wine, see if I can get those little floral notes, or where's the black cherry, where's the blackberry.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's really, really good. It's basically really good bread, real bread. It reminds me of the bread of Lionel Poilâne in Paris, the Poilâne breads. It has, and it even looks like it in terms of its sort of there's earth tones in the country because it's partly whole wheat, because the flour that you sent me is whole wheat, right? This is not sifted out. This is the full berry, right?
It's 100% everything.
100% extraction. So that makes this loaf about a 35% whole grain loaf and about 65% bread flour to give it a little bit more lift. But enough of that flavor is coming through. Anyway, thank you for sending me that.
Sure.
So tell me. So we'll talk briefly about this, and then we'll go continue the story that we started in the last episode. This flour is something you said is new, or at least this year you said the best crop of emmer that you've had. What happened? What was the big breakthrough?
It might be a nerd point, Peter, but I think it's fair to say, in going to my tractor donkey roots, I'm not peer reviewed, so I can say anything. And don't take this home, everyone listening, but I do. All the old seeds, and the older they are, the more they're responding in my ken, all the way up into Canada and the Maritimes, all the way over to the Pacific Northwest and above into Canada over there too. They're all responding now over the last 3 years with exceptional robustness. This blue tinge emmer is supposed to be a low strength, quote unquote, and there's a point here for everybody that bakes at home. Our most frequent question is, what's the protein of your flours? In land race, aka heirloom wheat culture, love that. their protein does not correlate to dough strength working characteristics. Please, it doesn't. You can have a 15% zero strength, zero extensibility flour,
Yeah.
and you can have a 9% very strong heirloom flour. In this case, the falling number of this wheat, which goes to crisping, Maillard, lamination, extensibility properties, the falling number is 200 points over anything that's ever been grown like this in our system. Emmer usually comes in about 350, 400 falling number. I hate metrics because they really don't do me any good as a baker. I'm not that good, but even they don't do me any good as a baker. And a real landrace baker where you're 100% on landrace, they're meaningless.
Yeah.
But the falling number can always win. It'll tell you if you're doing croissant work that you're going to laminate and have that multi-layered crisping Maillard reaction. And it also goes straight to Maillard too. If you have a high falling number, the Maillard's going to be exceptional.
So for those who don't know the language of bakers, that falling number refers to how long it takes for like a rod to fall through a dough made with this flour, and there's a timing on it, and that number signifies essentially the 10 what's the word I'm looking for?
Tensile.
Strength of that flour, the properties.
Right.
So dough can be very extensible, very elastic. It can also be very weak and slack. So the lower the number, the weaker the dough. The higher number, the stronger the dough.
Yeah. So if you have something with a falling number of 250, you're going to have a solid, like closed crumb. You're not going to get any of the Poulin style extensible air bubbles in it. You're not going to be clear. The crumb's not going to be clear, and the outer crisping is going to be single layer. In lamination, it won't express. And it's a nerd point, but getting back to this thing, this is not something we expect from these grains that in this case, I think you and I have said this before, Peter, but it's really important to state it again. 20 years ago, einkorn and emmer were about 8,000 to 10,000 years old.
Yeah.
10 years ago, they're about 20 to 25,000 years old. In the last year, they have found einkorn in caves. Einkorn is a relatively recent German word, as we all know. It means faro piccolo and einkorn, the same thing, triticum monococcum for nerds, right, in Latin. That is 44,000 years old, carbon dated, peer reviewed, and it's been up now for a year.
So essentially
44,000 years.
The oldest wheat known to man, not just in age, but in terms of its sort of origin, the origins of what we now think of as wheat for bread and pastries.
And the good thing to know, and you might have noticed in this flour, the farther back you go in wheat culture, the more keratin comes up in the flowers.
Mm.
We all know Renaissance paintings where we're seeing a still life and a torn batard, whatever.
Yeah.
And you see the crumb and it's almost saffron yellow color. And you're going, what's that?
Mm.
And the best einkorns and the best emmers all express keratin as flour. They also will express it to the point where it will actually tinge the entire loaf yellow. Those are the highest nutrition loaves available to mankind. Very rare in our culture anymore. They used to be prevalent all over Europe. It's interesting.
And the carotene, the beta carotene, not only adds color, but it actually has a flavor and aroma that is very appealing, much more so than just, say, flour that's very white and bleached.
So when you're thinking about baking properties, your levain, your reactivity of your levain, the fact that your wheat was harvested at what date, and dormancy did or did not sit in at another date, and you have an entirely different yeast profile in order to ferment new crop aerobic. They're breathing oxygen as those seeds are harvested. To a certain point, the hot cross bun point is where you're taking the yeast population from the prior aerobic crop. As the wheat now goes dormant, it barely breathes CO2, takes on a whole new population of yeast for ferment. This kind of dynamic is something that we lost at the Industrial Revolution, but it's coming back. To me, that's exciting. And the reason why is because the number one bread during the colonial era was rice bread. And the reason why rice bread was the number one wheat bread in the colonial era was because it was dyspeptic. Rice was in the pharmacopoeia. Wheat was in the herbal. You put them together, you have healthy, healthy, healthy.
Ah.
And it's good for old people, it's good for young people, good for people in general. So for me, being a rice guy, I end up being a huge bread advocate of the best breads you can get in the world. I don't care where they're made. I love the ones where in Vietnam where they throw it across the room at you hot, right out of this kiln that's burning at 1,000 degrees.
Yeah.
That's rice bread. And that culture is amazing. But what's even more important is that the Highlands culture in China and the culture of the Fertile Crescent, Hebrew culture, Greek culture, Roman culture, African culture, Muslim culture, all combine into one thing with regard to bread. To me, that's astounding.
Yeah.
And it's even in the Highlands of China. I didn't know this. I fell into this walking around the field like a dummy, right? Going, if this is actually, I'm looking at this, who is writing about this? That this culture is this old, it does this in the field, it makes this bread this way. These plants are reacting to what's going on with the atmosphere, with the climate change, with everything we think about stuff. They're getting better. That's why this bread is interesting. 560 falling number, never. I've never had an emmer with that, ever. And I don't usually do metrics, but I couldn't believe this stuff, so I sent it off to the University of Vermont Cereal Lab to get them to confirm it. Ask them to run it twice just to make sure.
Well, and we could geek out on this and just spend the whole next 2 hours talking about this one thing. But I want to make sure we cover. So we kind of took a leap from our last episode where you started out in rice and you grew up in that rice culture of the South, and then now we're talking about wheat, the oldest wheat known to man, including spelt. We've got einkorn, we've got emmer. All of these are ancient strains of wheat that are all very similar, but not like the wheat that we call commodity wheat of today. And so you're in that. And then you also got into bringing back or land race or heirloom strains of corn. And I think that anyone who's ever had Anson Mills corn grits, and most of the fine restaurants in the country that are doing shrimp and grits or any kind of grit dishes are using your grits because there's something, again, it's almost like eating fresh corn from the field. That was one of the first time I had grits made with your with your grits, I went, my God, it tastes like, still tastes like corn. It doesn't taste like, sort of the vanilla flavored grits that, that we're used to, or that we joke about. So how did that, tell us a little bit about all of that. And you started connecting the dots, basically, from rice to other things, and noticed this polyculture of grains that were growing together somehow. And this is where I think the genius comes in. The scientists may be geniuses in their area, but your genius is connecting the dots. And so how did you, tell us a little bit about that connection?
Well, I'd like to take credit for it, but honestly, Merle Shepard, Dr. Buford M. Shepard, has been my mentor from the very, very beginning. It is Merle that looked at me over the tops of Carolina Gold rice that was right up here in my head. I'm standing there going, this is what my mom used to talk about, Dr. Shepard. I was calling Dr. Shepard then, and he said, stop doing that. Call me Merle. And I go, okay, fine. And then I still couldn't do it. But Merle Shepard introduced me to the sun cycle, which has 14 core plants in it that were ripped off from African culture and displayed prior to the War of the Confederacy or the Civil War, for the way that we should all farm. And the backdrop was horrible. We won't even go there. But the forefront was the sun cycle is the oldest farming system on the planet. And it talks about rice and its interaction with wheat, interaction with sorghum, interaction with all kinds of African crops. You name them. 14 of them, never repeated in rotation year to year, all grown together. And I always thought, oh yeah, if you're going to grow rice, you grow rice. And then the next season, you're going to grow some wheat because it's cold. And then maybe you'll grow some peas or soybeans or something to put, nitrogen back in the soil. And that's called simple rotation. It's usually 3 crops these days: corn, wheat, and beans. They forgot the brassicas, they forgot the cucurbits, on and on and on. When we think about native culture, we think about Native Americans, and we think about the 3 sisters. And what dawned on me as a dummy was, oh my gosh, the 3 sisters and the sun cycle in Africa, they're kind of the same. And I had no idea what I was thinking or talking about. Then all of a sudden it dawned on me that we have maroon culture, and every time slaves ran away, they immediately could move into a Meso community anywhere on the American continents. They were wholly accepted, produced these incredibly complex villages with Native Americans. No, they didn't know the language. It didn't make any difference. They all knew the plant language. That's where this idea of the sun cycle comes in, and the fact that rice culture and recovery of land that's like overfarmed to cotton, et cetera, comes back quickly in polyculture. All those interactions, that's where the big light bulb went off.
Wow.
It's due to Merle Shepard.
So just to give a sort of a snapshot of the various kinds of products now that you, and we'll say starting from seed, essentially, that you're making available, having, I'm assuming you're contracting now with farmers to grow for you, specifically for you. What are some of the different varieties of things that you're offering?
Okay, 3 steps, basic. We grow everything that we mill. We contract with other farmers, so we're from Galveston to Maine. In research, we're across the United States and into the Maritimes and over in Western Canada, down in Mexico. We're also in the Fertile Crescent, which would involve the Holy Lands and Italy for support, especially in Sicily, support programs. So that's all done for seed. And seed, we do not sell. We jury it and give it to farmers and or small growers who are worthy. And so just to make sure, we don't sell seed, but it's the main thing we do. We give it away. So having said that, the entire research has been to move from really great native mazes. And immediately, you go back to Oaxaca for southern, I'm in the South, right? We're in Carolinas and Georgia. So if you want to see what your heritage corn is in the Carolinas and Georgia, you go to Oaxaca, because everything's there. If you want to see what happens with unguiculata introduction, which is cowpeas, we know them field peas, rice peas, my interest, because they are salt tolerant, so they'll grow with rice, hard on the coast. You go to Oaxaca. So the largest seed bank, the most diverse seed bank in the world is called INAFAP. It's in Oaxaca. And in there, it reads like a Carolina and Georgia lexicon of all of our antique crops that have all grown. Brassica sorghum, oats, rye, wheat. It's all there, and it looks just like us. In fact, we found a cowpea in Wilmington that was documented, Wilmington, North Carolina, was documented in 1726, that was documented, collected not long after that, and is in the INAFAP bank today. In Oaxaca. Why? Because slaves were thrown off of ships there.
Yeah.
And they did maroon communities there with native people.
So
we farm all those things now because it's all part of the sun cycle, and it's part of Mesoamerican cuisine. It's part of farming systems that belong to the Americas. And the introductory crops, wheat is not native. They were folded in immediately. Native people didn't go, ooh, we don't want wheat. They just started growing the best wheat you can get. The big deal I love is the tortilla in the Sierra Madres, where it was a little communion wafer, and they jumped the fence from the Jesuits, ran up into the mountains, grew this stuff, and the Jesuits got up there and found them growing 6-foot wide tortillas with it. They took the little teeny communion wafer and made it into a 6-foot wide tortilla in the mountains. The other one was Cortez, who the native people played a trick on him, and everything that the Jesuits introduced on Cortez's entry into Mexico as he goes north, by the time he gets to the Sonora and up to Pueblo country, they're already growing all his own stuff and handed it back to him for free. Say, you hungry? Here, try this. Hey, you know, we got this from somebody as a joke, right? Just extraordinary amounts of agronomy and good thinking and great food. You know, and when you look at bread and corn,
yeah,
the Pueblo ovens are revelatory because they look so much like European bread ovens that are made from rammed earth back in the day in the Fertile Crescent, Sicily, the Camargue, and off into Portugal and Spain. They all look the same. And the Pueblo Indians, this is their own meso ovens. That wasn't an influence from elsewhere. And they're baking corn in them.
It's like synchronicity. It's like,
yeah,
a great idea can exist in many places at the same time.
That's the one I keep stumbling across. Every time I think I know something, I found out somebody else did it 1,000 years earlier better.
Interesting.
Right?
So,
yeah.
So you, how many different kinds of wheat can people get from Anson Mills? Just to bring it back to Anson Mills as a sort of that's the focal point of all this. How many different kinds of wheat are you making available now? And I'm sure it changes from year to year.
As a pastry chef, 30 to 40, because we grow and then mill to form, custom only. And as a chef, 20 or so workhorses. As people in retail, so far, unless you ask and then we find a way to get it to you, probably 6 or 7, all pre-industrial, many, many thousand years old.
By the way, I'm still eating. I'm gnawing on this bread. I can't stop eating.
I want some.
When you have something like this, it's too good. You just can't stop.
I hear you.
So people that want to, like home cooks who want to be able to get this, because they're not going to, you're growing in relatively small batches compared to these commodity farmers, they can get it direct from the mill through your website?
Yeah, and what home cooks don't know, and what normally we don't invite, but we are now, because during the pandemic and with the civil unrest that's happening, I think it's really good to know that these things support community, and they do it as a one-way thing. It's not something we normally publish, and so I'm saying it here, but we don't have a program that's available to the public to say, oh, this is what we're doing. We've never done that. And we're 22 years in, just to make sure everybody knows. So you can imagine if it started on the Sea Islands that we're still there. And in order to support that, we're thinking that you can write and ask for anything. Used to be if you were a home cook and you asked for something that, say, Pam Young was using at the Lyle in London as a custom thing, we'd go, oh yeah, that's nice, but no, we can't do it. Now, not only can Pam Young get it, if you don't know anything I'll walk you through it, and we'll support you once you get it too. We used to worry about sending these things out because they're so bizarre, right? But they're also real food.
Yeah.
And we've gone through this thinking over the last 4 months that says, okay, well, we don't have any barriers. And we're thinking about unifying a retail and wholesale side. We haven't done it, but we're thinking about it. So if you are a home cook and you're driven by an instinct, which is the only way I got here, we will work with you directly. So you can ask for anything. And up until 2 months ago, you wouldn't get it. Starting 2 months ago, when we started going 3 shifts, 24/7, 6 days a week with 1 shift on Sunday, and we did it for 2 months straight without break, we decided, okay, we're just going to meal for everybody, whatever.
Well, I'm speaking of home cook, so I'm going to see if I can get that. I don't know if we can get this to show up on the screen here, but these are some loaves that were just sent to me, photos by my friend Douglas Rose, who you sent
Cool.
some of the same flour to. So
Nice.
there's two Emmer loaves here. The oval loaf in the lower part of the photo is made from the exact same flour that I used to make my loaf, the blue tinge. And then the one above it is Emmer that he was able to get from Lindley Mills, Joe Lindley at Lindley Mills, and they did sprouted Emmer. And he made it a sprouted Emmer bread. So he's holding those loaves for me, and this because he lives 2 miles from here. I'm going to go this afternoon, and we're going to do a tasting. I'm going to bring my loaf, what's left of it, if I don't eat it all, and then we're going to do some comparative tastings with his, just
Very
to show
cool.
you. And I think this is important because people who are watching are both, serious enthusiasts, and they support not just the pizza community, but the artisan community, which is why this is so important. But also, there's pizza operators who are now getting very interested in either grinding their own flour, getting heirloom grains, and introducing this next level of not just quality, but sustainability through the types of farming that you're doing. And before we run out of time, and we didn't even get to talk about all the corn products that you have, but again, various, just throw a number at me. Like how many different kinds of corn products do you have, or maize type products?
Over 100.
See, so
From at least 30 to 40 different kinds of heirloom maize, and we have another 100 in research easily, probably a lot more than that.
And it all started.
And we bring them out if we're asked.
This is incredible because it all started with an epiphany about rice, and then it blew across. And you at our bread symposium 3 years ago, you introduced the concept to a lot of people that many people, when they left the symposium, said that was their single most exciting takeaway from the symposium was you introduced the concept of polycrop farming. Polycrop culture, and you alluded to it in our last episode, talking about growing things together.
Right.
And you presented this as the perfect acre. That was the name of your talk, the perfect acre. And
right.
So, could you just, before we run out of time today, could you explain to everybody who's watching what polycrop farming is and what the future of that is? Because my colleague at Johnson & Wales, Harry Paymuller, made some polycrop loaves, if you recall, at that symposium that blew people away. It wasn't like any bread that anybody had ever tasted, and it was so good that people were like trying to grab a loaf and sneak it out of the symposium. It was that good.
Okay, so in order to, if you're farming, and we farm, you want to keep the soil healthy, and you want to improve the soil. And up until the Industrial Revolution, your inheritance as a farmer was determined by how much soil you build. The actual level of your farm would increase. And the paradigms back then, especially in New England, which goes back to the 1600s with European influence, those paradigms were, can you get a foot during your lifetime to give to your kids? Actually increasing the height of the land by 1 foot of perfect tilth.
Wow.
Meaning perfect soil. In order to do that, the notions from the Fertile Crescent and from ancient Egypt and from Rome and Greece and from the Camargue in France, Haute-Provence, where they still do some of this farming. In Sicily, especially, if you think about it, they've retained some of these notions of having multiple plants grown together, harvested together, right? And it was done at hand scale. And is there a combine that's mechanized that does this now? And we're close, because I won't do it, but there's informatics out there now that can distinguish how many 30 or 40 different kinds of plants in a polyculture field. And if you hook those informatics up to a combine, it could actually separate them during harvest. But we harvest them all together with a reaper. You cut it like hay, and windrow it and pick it up, and then thresh it then together.
Comes out of that is milled from that,
Yeah.
polyglot
So
of grains.
you don't. Yeah, go ahead. You don't change anything. You just cut it with all the plants together. You thresh it. You mill it with everything there. And then you can also do what's been done from antiquity, from the dawn of harvest and farming. You can do what's called triage. And we think of triage now almost exclusively as a medical term. But up until 1937, it only applied to harvest and how to separate the polyculture field after harvest. It was not a medical term.
Wow.
Right? So triage means separate after harvest or at harvest. Your choice, but mostly after harvest. And in Lyon, where they still farm this way, and it goes straight to a bakery, they'll triage for some loaves and they'll put them all together for others. But all the plant classes are there: cucurbits, legumes, oil seeds, brassicas, blah, 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 all of it, cereals.
Well, that's what was so cool about the bread that came out of that flour. You could taste the legumes, you could taste the peas, you could taste the wheat, you could taste the rye, you could whatever was growing, the grasses that were in there, the beans that were in there, all those flavors kind of came together. And probably the fear for any baker would be, well, but can I make a decent bread from it? The bread came out pretty damn good.
So here's,
it had cell structure, it had everything.
Yeah, so here's one for our vast appreciators of all things way off there in the hinterlands. Were it not for William Rubel, who, with Dara Goldstein, published a beautiful article on polyculture and horse breads. And when we say this, we have to think about Jonathan Bethany at Selu Bakery in Washington, D.C., who has horse bread and bird bread on his bread menu, and he sells a lot of it. And he's farming this way with Tor Oxner, who has his own farm and loves the idea of being able to go out and cut everything together and just send it. And Jonathan mills it and makes bread out of it. And they do one with millet and this and that and the other thing, which Jonathan worked in Africa, so he understands these things. He's got sorghum. And that flour makes bird bread because millet is bird food. A lot of people don't think about that, but it's true. And the other one is, for horse bread, he's doing what Arabians invented. So we're going way back in the Fertile Crescent for horse speed. Before the automobile, how fast could you go as a human being born on anything? It was on a live horse. Right. Did you want speed? Yeah, if somebody's chasing you trying to kill you, you wanted horse speed. So it was very important. Horse bread was more expensive than people bread for 1,000 years, easily.
And what was
and
it made?
It's highly nutrition. Made from polyculture. All the things we're talking about, legumes, oilseeds, they're all grown together.
Yeah.
Made into a Falkenbrot, right? Which is just people's bread.
Yep.
Could be Desem comes out of that culture. Desem bread is actually horse bread. Right?
I'm telling you.
And if you get all the transformation, you get germination, a little roasting, some alkalinity to do some souring, a little ferment. You get them all together and do nixtamal too. If you got 5, you have perfect food. That's manna in the Bible. So if you want to do Hebrew and Greek, you can actually read about this because there's recipes for this stuff. 1, how to grow it, and 2, how to take care of the seed. Because in kosher, when you're totally kosher, you have individual monocrop, but you're taking care of every plant. But as soon as you move away from high culture, you get into polyculture immediately, even in Hebrew culture. It's amazing to me the nuances involved in Greek, Hebrew, Roman, African. They all are the same thing when you get to it, and highlands of China.
Well,
just stunning.
Connecting the dots. That's really what
Totally.
You're doing. And I love the, how the brain cells are just firing left and right. My head's about to explode from all this because, it's so exciting to see, when somebody starts to track it down and put those connections together, you get connected to a much greater and deeper reality. And so thank you so much, Glenn.
Thank you,
We've
Peter.
been speaking with Glenn Roberts, founder of Anson Mills. You can find out all about their products by going to their website, but ansonmills.com, I would think, is the best, easiest way to get to it.
Sure.
Those who, you mentioned William Rubel, who was also one of the speakers at the same symposium that you spoke at. If anybody would like to see the talk that William gave or that Glenn gave, go to the Johnson & Wales International Symposium of Bread YouTube channel. I think the nickname for it is On the Rise. Just go in the search engine, On the Rise Bread Symposium, and it'll lead you to all of the talks, including Glenn's on the perfect acre, William Rubel's on the history of bread, in which he talks about horse bread a little bit, along with other things. And also it's that was a kind of an interesting presentation he gave, because
Totally.
he scandalized the attendees by taking off his shirt in the middle of the thing, and I don't know, it was crazy. It wasn't anything that anybody expected, but it was very memorable, and nobody could between that and polyculture and polycrop farming, there was those two things kind of like stole the show. So again, I know I feel like I'm going to spend the rest of the day just kind of nursing this bread, and because after hearing you speak, I feel through this as I taste this, connected to not just 6,000 years of bread making, but now I feel connected to 20,000 years of
maybe 40.
Well, who knows? I'll keep going deeper into
Next
the hole.
year, 60.
See if I can go through that wrinkle in time and pop out on the other side. But Glenn,
Fantastic.
It's always just so exciting to talk with you. It's stimulating. I'm so proud that I even know you and get to spend time talking with you, and I'm just really amazed at what you've created from a single aha moment and turned it into something that is really literally changing the world and changing the way people view their relationship to this planet and to the food that they eat. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter. It's an honor. Glad to know you.
And for those of you who are watching, join us on the next episode of Pizza Talk. We talk about everything, not just pizza, obviously. We always say that on Pizza Quest, our host website, that it's really a celebration of artisanship wherever we find it. Pizza is just the perfect metaphor for that quest. So thank you for being part of it. Glenn, thank you. And I will see you soon, hopefully at the next symposium, if we can pull it off.
Look forward to it, Peter. Thank you.